Question number 1, Joanne Lamont.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what engagements is planned for the rest of the day.
First Minister.
Today, Bruce Crawford, the Cabinet Secretary for Parliamentary Business and Government Strategy, is meeting the Norwegian Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg to welcome him to Shetland on Norway's National Day and to discuss plans for a deep-water key decommissioning facility in the Shetland Islands. I am delighted to announce to the Chamber that following discussions I had in Oslo on Tuesday, the Scottish Government and HIE together will make available £10 million to support a hugely ambitious project for the Northern Islands. And I know the whole Chamber will wish to welcome this exciting partnership between the Norwegian company AF Group and Lerwick Port Authority, which looks forward to secure decommissioning work in major offshore structures from the North Sea. The project could create up to 150 jobs in the Shetland Islands and in Aberdeen and deliver a scale of industrial capacity unmatched across these islands.
Joanne Lamont.
Presiding Officer, this week the Parliament debated the National Parenting Strategy and there was unanimous agreement that there had to be more support for parents who were struggling. We think this is important because we know some parents don't get it right, that the child is not always a priority, and this can have tragic consequences. Indeed, following the Declan Haney case, the First Minister and I had constructive talks about the issue of child protection. Can the First Minister update the Chamber on what progress has been made in this area?
First Minister.
Well, I do agree that we had constructive talks on that tragic case. And as we discussed in that meeting, the Government will be moving forward through the Children and Young People's Bill to be introduced, and we'll explore options in a range of areas to improve the situation so that we can get it right for every child.
Joanne Lamont.
And we welcome progress, and we do urge the First Minister to recognise just how serious it is and how quickly we need to move on this issue. For we now know that in March 2010, just 2 weeks before Declan Haney was found dead, Renfrewshire Council received a report from another case review, a case known as Family 10, which worryingly highlighted systemic failures in child protection. In this case, children were mistreated to a deeply distressing degree. The Family 10 review was too late to save Declan. Yet, 2 serious case reviews in Renfrewshire found systemic failure, and still no one has been held to account. Does the First Minister believe, after 1 death and 2 findings of systemic failure, Renfrewshire Council was best placed to investigate itself?
First Minister.
I think Joanne Lamont should accept that the reviews that have taken place have identified certainly failings in terms of provision. These reviews, as other investigations in the past, inform our intent to improve and enhance child protection across Scotland. These are vital matters. I'm certain that if we show goodwill on all sides, we can take these forward together as a united Parliament. We have both a legislative framework and a forum for making sure that we improve our current, not just our inspection services, but our monitoring services. And I think on that basis, this Parliament will do itself great credit to take things forward in that manner on behalf of Scotland's children.
Joanne Lamont.
But I do say to the First Minister, hoping for it doesn't make it happen. And there is a really serious issue here. Because here's the real point. In 2009, the First Minister told this Chamber that we had the best child protection inspection system, quote, anywhere on these islands, perhaps anywhere in Europe. Indeed, before the case of Family 10, before the death of Declan Haney, he said in this Chamber that his inspection system had found Renfrewshire Council to be one of the top 5 councils in Scotland. A few months after Declan Haney was found dead, the inspectors went back to Renfrewshire Council to follow up on that first visit. This time, they concluded that Renfrewshire Council's efforts to keep children safe were excellent. They reported, as a result of the very good quality of provision to protect children and meet their needs, we will make no further visits in connection with this inspection. The case of Family 10, systemic failures. The death of Declan Haney, fatal systemic failures. Yet before and after these terrible failures, his inspectors provided 2 positive reports, the second claiming the protection of children is excellent. In the light of the contrast between the First Minister's rhetoric about child protection and the reality, does he still believe his inspection regime is the best in Europe?
First Minister.
I think 3 times in that question, Joanne Lamont referred to my inspection regime and my inspectors. These are people who take forward vital work on behalf of this Parliament and this country. There is no doubt that the process of inspection and re-inspection has resulted in an improved situation in child protection across Scotland. There is also no doubt that that systematic process, which I believed was supported across this chamber, has resulted in substantial improvements. It's also the case, as Joanne Lamont must know, that no place in the world can ever provide a 100% guarantee for the safety of all children. I'm quoting exactly from Tam Bailey, the Scottish Commissioner for Children and Young People, in January of this year. But there are always, and should be, from these tragic cases, lessons to learn. This Government, this administration, and I hope this Parliament, is perfectly prepared and capable of learning them. And if we act together, not just in legislative terms, but in administrative terms as well, then we can further improve the situation for Scotland's children and further improve the protection. But can't we just do it on the basis that this is something that all politicians of whatever political persuasion wish to do, and as a national Parliament we can take national action on child protection?
Joanne Lamont.
It is true that the people doing the inspections are doing an important job, but they are accountable, and the First Minister is responsible for the capacity of that system to deliver. The First Minister needs to explain. His approach seems to be a counsel of despair. Yes, we can't give 100% protection, but we must do everything we can to understand where the failures are in order to make sure it doesn't happen again. So can he explain why the best child inspection service in Europe fails to find the systemic failures which led to the maltreatment of a family of children and which led to a baby's death? Can he explain why his best inspection service in Europe, after these tragedies caused by systemic failures, still says that service is excellent? An inspection that was getting carried out at exactly the same point when the significant case review in Declan Haney was saying there was at least 16 points for action need to be taken. The two things were happening at the same time. And in light of these failures, will the First Minister please order a full, independent public inquiry into child protection, not just in Renfrewshire, but across Scotland, so the public can have confidence that our systems are protecting our most vulnerable children?
First Minister. First Minister.
Let's see if we can identify areas of agreement. Child protection measures require constant vigilance. Therefore, this Parliament should support our partners across Scotland on the ground to make sure there's continual improvement. That's why we've updated the practice guidance and getting our priorities right for professionals working with children where substance misuse, for example, is a factor. We're piloting the risk assessment toolkit, which will help the protection of vulnerable children across Scotland. The development of the multi-agency learning and development framework is of crucial importance because in a number of tragic cases it has been clear that the contact between the variety of agencies who are charged with responsibility is not as good as it could be. The revision of the instruction, the Pink Book, the Child Protection Guidance for Scottish health professionals is moving forward, and we're introducing the Children's Services Bill. The bill will ensure that all children's services have a stronger focus on early years prevention and early intervention. These are the actions of administration, but I hope as a Parliament who are not in the slightest complacent about the tragedies that have occurred, but who know two things. Firstly, that the responsibility for wrongdoing and for the most tragic cases does, at the end of the day, lie with the perpetrator. The idea that individual social workers are perhaps accountable and responsible, of course they're accountable, but responsible for the actions of others, I don't think is the way that Scotland should look at these matters. We should support our social workers, our social work departments, to give the best possible protection for Scotland's children. And the second thing, which I hope can carry this entire Parliament, is these actions which I've identified both the administrative and the legislative, don't show any sign of complacency on this issue, but understand and have the requirement that constant vigilance and continuous improvement is absolutely necessary. And as we bring forward these measures, as a government, as a parliament, I do hope that all sides of this chamber will rise to the occasion on behalf of Scotland's children.
Question number 2, Ruth Davidson.
Thank you. To ask the First Minister when he'll next meet the Prime Minister.
First Minister.
Plans in the near future, although the last time I met the Prime Minister, he told me he wasn't particularly fussed about the date of the independence referendum. Obviously, he didn't impart that information to Ruth Davidson.
Ruth Davidson.
A topsy-turvy week when the First Minister is quoted saying that he has to wait 1,000 days to even have a long shot at winning a referendum. A fortnight ago, the First Minister was asked a very simple question by myself and others in this chamber. A question he said he wouldn't answer because he would tell all only to the Leveson inquiry. Well, unfortunately for the First Minister, Lord Leveson himself has entered the fray, saying that he wasn't in any way seeking to challenge the ability of parliaments to proceed as appropriate. So I will ask the First Minister again, was he hacked?
First Minister.
I suggest that Ruth Davidson reads Lord Leveson's statement, which is totally consistent with the view I gave to this Parliament. She should reflect that after Lord Leveson's statement, I note that Harriet Harman withdrew a range of parliamentary questions, accepting that Lord Leveson's indications were that the timetable should be perfectly satisfactory, both for meeting the requirements of a judicial inquiry and parliamentary accountability. I really do suggest to Ruth Davidson that she should accept bona fides and good wishes on this issue.
Ruth Davidson.
Well, perhaps the First Minister should accept the quotation given by a Scottish parliamentary spokesman this week that said that ministers are accountable to the Scottish Parliament and it is the role of MSPs to hold ministers to account. So I am doing my job. I am asking him to do his. The First Minister is accountable to this chamber. He is accountable to the people of Scotland. He is currently holding both of them in contempt, and therefore I will continue to ask, First Minister, were you hacked?
First Minister.
Yes, I am certainly accountable to the people of Scotland, as are all politicians in this chamber. But Ruth Davidson's accountability to the people of Scotland hasn't been working out very well, according to election results. After Lord Leveson made his comments this week, the opposition in the Westminster Parliament accepted that the timetable for information was perfectly satisfactory, both in terms of giving information to the judicial inquiry established on an all-party basis and fulfilling the absolute requirement of parliamentary accountability and responsibility. Now, let's just take it on that issue. I could go on about the revelations this week about the incredible contact between Conservative Party Prime Ministers and major figures like Rebecca Brooks, but let's just take it on the basis that I'm happy to go to Lord Leveson and give a full account of my actions. I think I'll be in substantially less trouble when I give that account than certain members of Ruth Davidson's party. I think that's the way we should do things, and I'll be delighted to answer Ruth Davidson and anybody else's parliamentary questions as well.
Jackie Bailey.
Presiding Officer, whilst there have been welcome reductions in CDIF and MRSA levels reported yesterday, for which we should rightly praise NHS staff, does the First Minister share my concern that in this week alone we've seen 6 deaths at the Royal Alexandra Hospital in Paisley, over 30 wards closed and more than 100 people affected by norovirus across Scotland? And aside from sending our condolences to the families concerned, will he agree with me that in light of the substantial rise in norovirus, we need to consider establishing a specialist laboratory to combat that rising level of infection?
First Minister.
Well, I'm sure that Jackie Bailey will have seen the comments from Harry Burns in terms of the arguments for such a laboratory, but also putting the stress on that combating norovirus is a matter of clinical efficiency and the stress which is necessary in terms of combating norovirus and indeed all other hospital-acquired infections. We send, obviously, our sympathy as a chamber and as a parliament to those who have been caught up and those whose relatives have died in this latest outbreak. But they have the assurance, as Jackie Bailey, I think, indicated in her question, that we treat hospital-acquired infections with the utmost seriousness. And the dramatic reductions in a range of hospital-acquired infections are, I think, due in substantial part to the efforts that are being made. I know that Jackie Bailey in the past has suggested that Scotland is the epicentre of hospital-acquired infections. I also know that her comments were based on a 2006 survey. So therefore, given the improvements that have been made, given the determination to tackle norovirus and other hospital-acquired infections, then I hope Jackie Bailey will accept that the clinical determination is amply demonstrated in the decline in hospital-acquired infections, but we realise and recognise that we must do everything possible and strive our utmost to tackle the tragic consequences they have on patients and indeed for hospital staff.
Kevin Stewart.
Presiding officer, there are concerns in Aberdeen, the North East and throughout the country about the ditching of the Super Puma helicopter the other week. In light of the impact on employment in the oil and gas industry, what discussions has the Scottish Government had with the UK Government and its agencies regarding the grounding of the Bond Super Puma fleet?
First Minister.
Well, Presiding Officer, first I'd like to pay tribute to the pilots of the Bond helicopter which ditched last week for their excellent airmanship and quick thinking under these circumstances. The decision to suspend operations of Bond's Super Puma fleet was a matter for the operator pending investigation into the cause of the incident. Both the Air Accident Investigation Branch and the helicopter manufacturer Eurocopter were quickly on the scene to investigate. The AAIB, in recognition of the importance of helicopter operations to the offshore industry, disseminated the results of its initial investigation very quickly indeed, which enabled Bond, in discussion with Eurocopter, to lift the flight suspension. The Scottish Government at all times liaised with Bond and the Department of Transport during this period. I am satisfied in these difficult circumstances that the correct action was taken, and let me repeat the appreciation for the skill and human endeavour of the pilots concerned.
Sandra White. Can we have Ms White's mic on?
Thank you. The First Minister is aware of the BBC's trust rubber stamping of the BBC's job-cutting exercise, delivering quality first, and the very grave concerns expressed about the potential impact of these cuts in Scotland. Does he also agree with the BBC Audience Council for Scotland's submission to the process, which expresses serious concerns about these proposals and believes that the implications for services in Scotland have not been fully explored? Does he believe there is basis to ask the BBC Trust to review their decision?
First Minister.
I do. I share Sandra White's concern. It's a matter, obviously, I had discussed with the BBC at some length to recognise their position as a national broadcaster in Scotland. And it's difficult to reconcile the budget provision for the BBC in Scotland with the obligation it has in terms not just of the generality of programmes, but current affairs coverage in a particularly important time in Scotland's history. So I do hope that the BBC will reconsider. I do hope there is a case to go to the BBC Trust. I believe there is, and I hope that something of these damaging cuts can now be reversed.
Question number 3, Liam MacArthur.
Thank you. To ask the First Minister what action the Scottish Government is taking to provide support to families fostering disabled children.
First Minister.
Well, it's important to recognise the role foster carers play in caring for some of Scotland's most vulnerable children. Their dedication and commitment to developing the lives of these young people is indeed a massive undertaking. The Government is committed to a reform of children's services to ensure every child gets the support they need through embedding the principle of getting it right for every child in statute. We are committed to speeding up the change across public services and bringing forward the legislation to put this into effect. Children with disabilities in foster care and other care settings will, of course, benefit in particular from this programme.
Liam MacArthur.
Can I thank the First Minister for his response, but as you'll be aware, this week's Quarriers report provides depressing confirmation that children in Scotland with multiple disabilities and complex needs face the greatest obstacles in achieving a foster placement. Exhaustion and a lack of support were quoted as the main reasons for reluctance amongst 3/4 of foster carers to take on a child with such complex needs. Given these findings, what commitment can the First Minister give that targeted support will be available across the country to give foster carers the confidence they can take on these more challenging roles? In particular, will he ensure that specific training and respite care are in place for foster carers across Scotland? And if we accept that we are failing too many of our looked-after children, Does he agree that the Quarriers report confirms the failure with regard to some of the most vulnerable children in our society is even more shameful?
First Minister.
Well, we're going to examine the Quarriers report, the YouGov survey for Quarriers with substantial care, and we are committed to promoting and reforming foster care to meet the increasing needs of children in care, especially those with additional support needs. I think, looking at the current financial support, as Liam McArthur will know, it depends on the age profile of the child, but it also considers the intensive needs, and it can range from £160 to £525 per week per child. Now, through the Children and Young People's Bill to be introduced, we will explore options to introduce a set minimum allowance level for fostering. And Liam McArthur, and I'm sure he'll contribute substantially to these discussions, can be assured that we are very aware and concerned about some of the aspects highlighted by the YouGov survey for Quarries.
Question number 4, Bob Doris.
To ask the First Minister what the findings are of the latest research on the effects of minimum pricing of alcohol.
First Minister.
Well, the Scottish Government announced on Monday that the minimum price to be set at 50p per unit, taking account of inflation levels since these matters were last discussed. Academic modelling from the University of Sheffield shows that this will result in 60 fewer deaths, 1,600 fewer hospital admissions, 3,500 fewer crimes, and 32,300 less days absence from work per year.
Bob Doris.
Benefits to public health and the potential savings to the NHS, Labour's continued opposition to minimum pricing is both opportunistic and flawed. But despite Labour, minimum pricing shall be delivered. Therefore, does the First Minister agree with me that the planned independent review on the benefits of minimum pricing is both crucial to allow ongoing parliamentary scrutiny in this place, as well as to demonstrate to the wider public of the significant health and social benefits that this can deliver?
First Minister.
Well, I do agree, and NHS Health Scotland will lead on a comprehensive evaluation of the impact of minimum pricing. Consumption and harm will be closely monitored over time, and any differential impacts between different groups of the population, or indeed unintended consequences, will be identified and explored. There is now a substantial majority in this chamber for minimum pricing. I welcome that, and I welcome the cross-party support. But members, perhaps on the Labour benches, should be aware that that support extends not just across the chamber, but beyond this country. I noticed, for example, that the Labour Party's UK Shadow Health Minister, Diane Abbott, in response to the news from Scotland, tweeted that she believes Westminster should match the Scottish proposal. Scottish Labour are now in the truly remarkable position of not just being isolated in this Parliament on the policy, they're even isolated within their own political party.
Jackie Bailey.
Can I say how delighted I am that the First Minister pays such attention to tweets from Diane Abbott? I look forward to that continuing. But he will be aware that we made clear at stage 1 of the bill that Labour will support minimum unit pricing if the windfall to alcohol retailers is fully clawed back. The First Minister has the mechanism with the public health levy to do so, so why, at a time when the alcohol treatment budget is being cut by his government, will he not claw back the £125 million profit rather than have it simply line the pockets of supermarket shareholders each and every year?
First Minister.
If Labour on this issue is motivated by concern for supermarket profits, then why did they vote against the health levy affecting supermarkets? I can imagine that Jackie Bailey goes into one day vitally concerned about the economic position of supermarkets, and then turns up at First Minister's question complaining that they're going to get a windfall. I know that perhaps it depends which debate she's talking to, which Parliament she's talking to, but basically, isn't it the case that what Labour's party's opposition to minimum pricing boils down to is an SNP proposal? Never mind the benefits to Scotland, never mind the impact on health, never mind the lives that are going to be saved, never mind the beneficial effect for the National Health Service. It's an SNP proposal, therefore it must be wrong. Now, I say to Jackie Bailey in all conscience, that sort of attitude should be condemned to the past, because it's out of step with the people of Scotland.
Margot MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I thank the Chamber for its welcome? Now you'll maybe not be too pleased at what you welcomed. I don't imagine the First Minister, when he was in Norway, had time to ask the Norwegians how they manage their drink problem, because they too like a drink, and they come from the same sort of origin as we do, with the same sort of history. But as I say, I don't imagine he had time to do that. So I wonder if he took the opportunity to discuss the possibility of Scotland becoming a member of EFTA, which, given our close relationship and energy with Norway, would seem a much better berth than the bill that would seek to absorb us in a common energy policy for the EU.
I'm afraid it's very wide off the mark.
Well, there was a range of discussions in Norway which had touched on many things, including minimum pricing of alcohol.
Question number 5, Richard Simpson.
Back to some reality, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister. What the Scottish Government's response is to the finding in the report by the Royal Pharmaceutical Society in Scotland that care home patients are being prescribed powerful drugs for long periods of time without proper checks.
First Minister.
Yeah, I just wonder if Richard Simpson's aside there is a sign that perhaps he's not totally comfortable with the Labour Party's stance in some of these health issues. Yeah. But the report, of course, does not make the claim that Richard Simpson suggested. The Royal Pharmaceutical Society report approving pharmaceutical care in care homes, I believe, is a positive and welcome contribution to the future provision of care to this particular group of patients. The main finding of the report highlights that pharmacists, working as part of an integrated multidisciplinary team, can improve the quality and safety of care for people in care homes. As part of its work, the review of pharmaceutical care of patients and community in Scotland, announced in October last year, is considering evidence of the specific pharmaceutical care service needs of residents in care homes and how best these should be met, with a particular emphasis on the clinical role of pharmacists in achieving service delivery.
Richard Simpson.
Can I welcome that response from the First Minister and the group that are working on this, but I wonder if the First Minister is aware of the research published in the British Journal of General Practice last month, showing that despite a reduction in psychoactive prescribing, which is welcome, residents in care homes are still 22 times more likely to be on antipsychotic medication. And also the study commissioned by the General Medical Council on errors in general practice prescribing, both of which reinforce the 2009 Mental Welfare Commission report called Remember, I'm Still Me. So why is the government denying my constituents in care homes the right, where they have capacity, the right to register for long-term conditions monitoring by community pharmacists? And will he ensure that for those who do not have capacity in residences, actually do have contracts with pharmacists, as is carried out in Tayside, that ensures safer, more effective prescribing for this vulnerable group and really tackles this problem of excessive psychoactive treatments?
First Minister.
Yeah, this is a very substantial and important issue. Now, what puzzled me about Richard Simpson's written question, is he referred to claims made in the report itself. Now, as I'm sure he now realises, actually the report didn't make that claim. It made reference to the Mental Welfare and Care Commission report, the one that he's just himself referenced, Remember, I'm Still Me. And the first answer I gave was just looking at we should take what's actually in the report, because it makes a number of extremely positive suggestions to take forward this matter. But I'll certainly look carefully, given Richard Simpson's expertise in these areas, to see if the contribution he makes can also be taken into account in addition to the Royal Pharmaceutical Society report.
Question number 6, John Lamont.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister, in light of the Scottish Government's recent decision to hire a PR firm, what its position is and whether a mechanism should be established to ensure that such services are not used for party political purposes.
First Minister.
Well, I'm afraid to disappoint to John Lamont, the Scottish Government is not hiring such a PR company. I'm desperately surprised that he hasn't managed to open his Scotsman to page 2 today, and therefore he'll read the apology we accept that the headline in the report did not accurately reflect the facts, fell short of our usual high standards.
You're not John Lamont.
We apologise for the error and are happy to set the record straight. I'm sure that John was about to say exactly the same thing.
John Lamont.
Well, I thank the First Minister for that very helpful response. Given that the referendum in Scotland's future is fast approaching, does the First Minister not accept that mechanisms should be put in place across government to ensure that the job of government is being done and not simply promoting the SNP's separatist agenda?
First Minister.
Well, that was a neat shimmy from the original question, wasn't it? I think that John now accepts that the premise of his original question, of course, was deeply mistaken, actual total nonsense. But nonetheless, it does actually get worse, incidentally, because I had to look back to check when these services were first tendered, and it wasn't even under the Liberal Labour administration in Scotland. They go right back to the Scottish Office Conservative administration. Now, the idea that Michael Forsyth, that epitome of the middle way in politics, could possibly have led the Conservative Party down the direction of propaganda rather than information. I think both John Lamont and I will agree such a thing was not possible. So now he knows that actually the report on which he based his question was totally mistaken. Perhaps he'll just agree that the information that comes from this government is information for the people of Scotland.
That ends First Minister's question. We now move on to members' business. Members who are leaving the chamber should do so quickly and quietly.